Hey, what's up, guys? So I had a request to do a tutorial on mixing drums, and I'm going to show you here on 3 different tracks, kind of what I do as far as my drum processing goes and my mixing and all that stuff. All 3 of these tracks are tracks that are going to be coming out on my first EP. It's coming out on Dirty Quarter Recordings, and that's coming out sometime at the end of November. So yeah, if you guys like my videos, guys get any use out of these things, it'd be awesome if you supported me. So yeah, let me go through and show you guys what I've done on this track. It's my track called Coalesce. I'll go through these drum tracks and show you the processing I did. This track, it's more of a progressive house track, so I didn't do a ton of processing on these drums. And one thing you'll notice that I don't do, which I know a lot of people do, it just doesn't work for me as well, is bussing my drums to a drum bus, and then kind of compressing that all together. I find when I've done that in the past, there are tracks that I've done that on. I find when I do that, I run into more problems, and that's just my workflow. It's not to say that there's any right way or wrong way to do things. If that's what works for you, go ahead and do it. It just, to me, causes more problems. It tends to give my tracks a little bit of an over compressed sound. So I try and do a little bit of processing as possible on any of my instruments. Nowadays, with samples being as good as they are, you don't need a whole heck of a lot of compression. It's going to really, for me, I feel like it comes down more to your mixing, and your levels and all that stuff that are going to make your drums and make your instruments sound like they're all one cohesive unit. So for instance, like this kick, I don't have any compression going on. I know you see this, but this is just side chained to my snare. So there's no actual compression going on. This is just there to duck the volume every time the snare hits. But you can see I don't have the gain boosted, so it's not compressing and then boosting everything else. So there's not actual compression going on. It's just simply just ducking the volume for me every time the clap hits. And you'll notice my snare, again, no compression. These samples are good samples. I don't really need to compress them. I do have 2 different samples that are layered, and instead of compression, wait, maybe I don't. Well, how do I have this on this track? Oh yeah, so this is just one. I think on one of these other tracks I've got two snares layered together, and I'll show you how I did that. So anyway, here's the beginning of this track, so you can kind of hear what I've done with the drums. Okay, so you can hear what my drums are doing. Sorry, I'm gonna show you my kick. And let me do this. If my vocals cut out, it's because I forgot to solo this. This is annoying, but I do that on occasion. Okay, so here's the kick, and then I'll go through the processing I did on the kick. Okay, so here's the EQing that I did on this kick. And I believe this was from the Dead Mouse Transfer pack, and it's the Big Kick 40. And then this is how I have it EQ'd. I really boosted the lows. I just did that with this kick because it sounded good. You can layer a like subby kick underneath it. I'll show you one of these tracks where I did do some layerings on my kick. I try personally to stay away from layering my kicks. I just try and find a good sample that'll work with EQing for the track that I want. I've found that when I layer my kicks, I run into problems. But that may just be because I'm lazy and I'd rather spend the time finding a great sample that I can EQ the way I want than trying to find 2 or 3 different kicks samples and EQ them all and kind of level them all and compress them all together to try and make one awesome sound. I find that that's a hell of a lot of work. So I'll go through and find a kick that I like, and then I'll EQ it to my liking to make it my own. So let me show you what the kick sounds like with none of this processing on. And then with the EQ. So already you can hear a huge difference in how that sounds. And then, like I said, all I'm doing for this is I'm sidechaining it to my snare. So I'm sending my snare to bus 2. And then I am then sidechaining to bus 2 on this. And all I'm doing is I've got a very fast attack, medium to low release. And all I'm doing, since I'm not boosting the gain, typical like when you're actually compressing something, you're gonna see the gain reduction here, but then you're gonna boost everything else that's underneath what's being reduced. So if you've got, your peaks are being reduced by 3 dB, and then you boost this 3 dB, what it's doing is it's bringing everything below that threshold, and it's boosting it 3 dB. So since I'm not doing that, it's not really compressing it. The compressor is acting more as volume automation at this point than actual compression. So yeah, that's all this is doing on this compressor, is it's just ducking the volume down a couple dB every time the snare hits. And I'll show you what it's doing. So you can see it's ducking about 4 dB each time the snare hits. And that's just so that you're still getting some of the thud. You're still getting some of that boom, that bassiness from the kick, but you're not getting the punch as much from the kick. because I want the snare, I want that punchy high end from the snare to cut through. So that's why I'm ducking that. So I'm just ducking it really quickly. So it's just ducking the first part of that kick hit, and then it's bringing it back in. So you're still getting that tail end of the boom of that bass of the kick, but you're just cutting out that kind of punch of the kick when the snare hits, because the two kind of clash. And then bus one, I believe I have this as my parallel compression. Yeah. Which I call fat fader, but I can rename that. Let's do this actually. Parallel compression. Okay. And all that's doing is you're just compressing the crap out of it. Super high attack, super fast release. You're pretty much limiting it at this point at a 20-to-1 ratio. Yeah. That's all that's doing. Then what I do is I send it pre-fader. So it's sending the signal before any volume on this fader, any volume automation that I'm doing. It's sending like this, I'm sending it at unity gain. So I'm sending that full amount of signal before it goes to this, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if other DAWs have that. I have no idea. I know Pro Tools does. I know Logic does. I'm not sure about Ableton or FL Studio. I have no idea how those ones work. I've never used those. But yeah, that's what I'm doing with that. And I just barely inputting this up, so I'll let you hear what the difference is with this. Oh yeah, both the snare and the kick are going to that. So both of these are going to bus one. So I'm going to bring this volume down so you can hear what it sounds like without it, and then with it on. I have it at minus 27 dB, which is pretty low. So it's only making a very, very subtle difference. And all this is going to do is it's going to add a little bit more punch to your drums. So anything that's lacking in that punch, this is going to help that. So here we go. All right, so you can hear how that subtly changes the sound. You're going to be able to hear these things a lot better if you're listening in headphones or good monitors. If you're listening on your like laptop speakers, it's probably going to be hard to hear any of this stuff. Let me see if I can just... So you can hear just what the parallel compression sounds like. So yeah, you can hear how that doesn't sound good on its own, but that mixed with this sounds good. So this is kind of like your dry wet. So these, my kick and my snare, these are my dry signals. And then this is kind of like a wet signal where I'm adding this effect in. So when it's all the way down at 0 dB or in whatever, when it's all the way down here at the bottom, you're not getting any of that signal. So as I bring this in, you're getting some of that wet signal. So you're getting just that overly compressed signal, which is adding a lot of punch to the drums. Let's see. I don't have a heck of a lot of drums going on in this song. It's pretty minimal. This little drum loop, I can play this. It's just some samples that I cut up. And then this is just the EQing that I did. Fairly subtle EQing. Let me show you what it sounds like with and without it. I can barely hear any difference on that, but hopefully you can tell. This hi-hat loop. Okay, now normally what I would do if it's like just a normal hi-hat sample that I've thrown in is I'll probably send this to the Reverb as well, but it's a hi-hat loop that I have going on here, and it's got a little bit of reverb on it on its own. So I didn't add that to it. And as far as the EQing went, it kind of sounded good on its own. So I didn't really need to do a whole heck of a lot with that. I probably could at least cut the lows. Okay. I think that's it on this track as far as the drums go. Oh, I didn't really go over the snare, did I? Let me go over the snare. So here's the snare. And let me show you with the EQ turned off. So you can see how this EQing is pretty minimal, but you can hear how that really cleans it up. And the sample I used was from the Vengeance Total Dance. Claps and Snares #1. And then again, I've got that being sent to my parallel compression. I have it being sent, like I said, it's just being sent to bus 2 so that I can sidechain my kick. And then bus 2, which is right here, has no output. So we're not getting anything out of that. It's just a signal being sent there so that I could sidechain to it. And then bus 3 here is my my reverb bus, which I will go over. I'll go over that too. And this has a decent amount of reverb going. Let me bypass that. So that's really helping that sound big. Give it some good space. Then that reverb bus. Okay, so this reverb bus is just the Space Designer. And I've got it on long snare, which I believe is under... large spaces. Here we go. So large spaces, rooms, and then long snare reverb. And then I messed with the time a little bit. And you just want to put your dry all the way to 0, put your reverb all the way up to max. And then you just mess with this signal. You start down here at the bottom and bring it in until it sounds good. I think that's where I had it. I think that's it for the drums. Yeah. That's it for the drums on this track. So you can see how this is, it's fairly minimal. I like to do as little processing on samples as possible, just because, like I said, it nowadays with the samples being as good as they are, you don't need a whole heck of a lot going on. So long as your stuff is leveled correctly, it shouldn't necessarily need compression. Compression, all it's going to do is... all compression is really doing is leveling things out. So if you throw all your drums to a drum bus and you then compress it, your snare and your kick are going to be the things that are probably going to be peaking the most, right? So your hi-hats, your toms, anything else that you throw in there, they're going to be a little bit quieter, so those aren't going to be peaking. So what it's going to do is you're going to compress it, and you're going to bring the volume down on the stuff that has a hotter signal, like your kick and your snare. So it's going to compress those, and it's going to bring that level down, and then you're going to boost the gain, the makeup gain, because you're compressing. So you're going to boost that makeup gain to bring everything under that up. Well, all that's doing is it's adjusting levels. So if you adjust your levels correctly beforehand, you shouldn't need to do that. And the way that compression works is it's kind of destroying the audio quality. It's not like normal volume control in the sense of when you're using it as a compressor. So when you're bringing the volume down on some signal and then you're bringing everything else up, it's squashing that signal a little bit. So you're going to notice if you throw compression on your actual tracks, on your individual tracks, if you throw a compressor on your kick, and you throw a compressor on your snare, and you throw a compressor on your hi-hats, and then you throw it to a bus, you send all these to a bus, and then you compress that bus, even if it's a minimal amount of compression, and then you throw it into your master. If you're doing any compression on your master, it's just, to me, it's overdoing the compression stages. It doesn't, good quality samples and good quality mixing shouldn't need that much compression. Good leveling and good volume control is going to be way better in the long run for your audio source than using compression. So if you can stay away from compression and still get great sounds, do it. You'll notice a huge difference. The number one thing with people that send me like emails and stuff saying, "Oh, how do you get your track so loud without it distorting?" That's probably like the number one thing for most new producers. How do you get your track so loud without it distorting? That's going to be a great mix is gonna do that. You know, the mastering, at least my mastering, is fairly minimal on what I do. I spend a lot of time with my levels. I spend a lot of time with my EQs and all that, and I'd rather spend the time getting my levels correctly, my volume levels correct, rather than compressing, because the samples that we're getting nowadays are most likely already being super compressed. So you don't need to compress them a million times again. They're already being compressed. So you're going to start to notice a lot of distortion and a lot of audio problems as you get towards your mastering stage, if you're compressing the heck out of all your stuff. So hopefully that kind of helps. So anyway, that's that track. Let me bring up the next one. Okay. So here's the one that I did that has the layered kick stuff going, so I can explain that. So here's let me show you just I'll play the beginning of this song. Okay. Let me go over what I did. This. Make sure I solo that. Okay, so this kick. Just loop this. Okay, so this kick. Again. Here's what I did with the EQing, and here's what I did before. Just solo that. Okay. Okay, so you can hear what that sounds like. Let me see what kick I used. Okay, again, this is from that Transfer Dead Mouse pack, and it's an analog kick number 17. So that's what it sounds like on its own. This compressor. Okay, so this compressor is compressing it a tiny bit. So you can hear how much better that sounds. This compression is super subtle. It's barely anything. And on this track, I didn't do the parallel compression. I got great punchy kick sounds by itself on this track, so I didn't need to do the parallel compression. That stuff is not stuff that I do on every track. It just depends on what the track needs and what the sample may need. So then let me show you. I layered that with these. And all these are both the same. I just have them offset because they were only on every half note. Or on every whole note, I mean. So now we've got this going on quarter note. And you can hear how that's just straight sub. And here's how I have that. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Both of these, I'm not going to I mean, they're both exactly the same. They're just, you can see that they're offset. So you've got your 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So they're just offset. So they're both EQ'd exactly the same, but here's what I do with the EQ, because all I want is that bassiness from this. Let me bring these both up. So here's with it on. So this one you're probably going to need headphones to hear, but when those are bypassed, you get a little bit of click from it. So I just EQ'd that out because all I want is that sub. And snare. Here's the snare. What did I use? Okay, the Vengeance Electro Pack, Clap 59. Here's the EQ. So that's a subtle change, but it does make a difference. Boosting this right here, this is normally a range that most people cut, but it sounded good boosted a little bit on this snare. And then I added the sample delay, and all this is going to do is it's going to delay the right channel. So you're getting the signal out of the left channel first, and then it's going to come out the right channel milliseconds later, which just makes it sound nice and wide. And then I've got this being sent to that parallel compression again. This bus 2 again is for side chaining, which I think on the other version that I have on here, I've got all 3 of these being sent to one bus. So here, let me do that actually so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So let's send this. I don't know if it's going to let me. So output. sorry, bus. So let's send these to bus 10. Yeah. Okay, so bus 10. Let's call this kick. Now, what I would do, I think what I did on my other version is I then have this side chained to that snare. So bus 2 here. So bus 2 is that snare. Oops. So yeah, that's all you would do. Okay, I put these back the way they were. Okay. So that's a way of making, so pretty much what I did by sending all those out to its own channels, I made these one whole sound. And then I am then side chaining them as a whole to the snare. So busing it that way makes it a lot easier rather than throwing an individual compressor on each one of these to the snare and side chaining them to the snare individually. I can send them all to a bus and then side chain that bus. Let's see. So yeah, those are the kicks. That was the snare. What was bus 4? Bus 4 is reverb, I think. Yeah. So here's what I did with this. So this was the setting that I used, which was piano warmth. Which I have no idea where that one is. Oh, here we go. So medium spaces, rooms, and then piano warmth. Again, dry all the way to 0, reverb all the way up to max. And that does it for that. Again, I'm not sending all my drums to a bus and then compressing them all together because, like I said before, if you do your volume leveling correctly, you shouldn't need to do that. What you can do is just make sure that everything has the same sort of space. You'll sometimes add, reverb to all your drums. So make sure all your drums are going to the same reverb channel. So, and they can be in different amounts because, like for this track, it didn't sound good with the kick having any reverb on it. Sometimes I will do a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of reverb on the kick, but this one sounded better without it. And if there's hi-hats or anything like that, which this track doesn't have, if there's hi-hats or anything, I think the next one that I'm going to show you does have that. You want to make sure that they're using the same reverb as everything else on the drums. And that's to me, getting your levels adjusted to make them sound like an actual drum kit and getting the space that the drums are sitting in. So like as if the drums were all being played in the same room, they're going to sound more like one cohesive unit. I think that does it on this as far as drums. This track was fairly minimal on drums. Let's bring up the... Okay, so here's that other track. This one's called The Longing. I also have a full song tutorial up on this. So if you want like a more in-depth on this track, I have that up on my YouTube as well. So for this one, I'm just going to go through the drums and kind of explain what I did with the drums. Let me go past the intro here. Play this. Okay, so that's that. I love that part of that song. It's probably one of my favorite pieces of music that I've ever done is that little bit right there. Freaking love that part. Anyway, the kick, all I have it doing here at the beginning is I've got the low cut frequency kind of coming in so you can hear the sounds like more of a click here at the beginning. And then it comes in full like that. So this kick, the gain, all I have is for automation purposes. That's one thing that I will, let me explain that real quick. So what I do for a lot of my tracks, instead of automating volume, I use this fader as an overall control for my volume. So if I want to automate volume, I don't want to automate this. I will automate a gain. So that at the end of everything, when I'm doing my mixing, I can then boost everything. So if I like how I have, say at the beginning of a track, I've got the kick slowly fading in. Similar to how I did with the automation on the EQ. Say this was volume automation and I had it starting down here at the bottom and then I had it getting louder. I would do that with a gain. So say at the end of the track when I'm doing my mixing, when I do my final mix down, I go, you know what? The kick needs to be boosted 1 or 2 dB. Instead of having to go into each automation point and boost all those 2 dB, I can just boost this overall volume 2 dB and it's going to bring everything up rather than having to go through each automation point. So having a gain on your track as well as, you know, your volume, you want to automate one or the other. And you could do it the other way around, I suppose. So you could have volume automation points on this, on your actual volume, and then throw in a gain and boost it 2 dB if you want. So you could do it either way. But having that is a really good thing to have. So let me show you what I've done here. Let's see. Okay, it's solid. So let's go right here. So let me bypass this stuff. Okay, so here's this one's from the Vengeance Dirty Electro, and it's the neon kick. And here's what it sounds like with no processing. EQ. So you can hear all that's doing is it's boosting those lows a little bit. It's giving it some more subby bassiness to it, but it's cutting out some of the mud as well. And then again, I did the same thing on this with sidechaining it to the snare. Same trick that I did before. This gain isn't doing anything. Then bus 1 is the parallel compression again. Parallel compression. And this is just like a preset that I have for this, so it's going to be the same. So let me show you what it sounds like with that on and off. Okay, and then on this track, I did do a tiny bit of reverb. Okay, so you can hear that with headphones on, and it's a small enough amount that you can't necessarily hear it in the track so much as you can when it's soloed. If you have too much reverb on a kick, it's really going to just make it sound muddy and gross. So let me go through the snare now. Vengeance Electro, snare 38. And okay, so here's the good example of what I'm talking about. So this is why I threw a gain on here. So I'd used the volume here to automate, right? And then now if I want to boost everything as a whole, I've got this. So I can say oh, it's too quiet. Now I can boost everything by 1 dB instead of coming in here and boosting it 1 dB. Hopefully that makes sense. And here's the EQ. Let me turn this stuff off. This one is just that snare bus it's being sent to for the side chaining. very, very subtle. All I did on this was just boosted this 500 hertz range 2 dB, and I cut some of the lows at 30 hertz, but that's all I did on that snare. It sounded pretty good on its own. And then the parallel compression, here's what that does. And then reverb. Okay, and then I set up my snares a lot of times. If I don't throw on the sample delay like I did on that last one that I was showing you, how I had the sample delay, I'll set up my snare to be a slight bit to the left. And I set up my drums like an actual live drum kit. So your kick is going to be dead center. Your snare is going to be a little bit left. I would put one of my crashes to the left, one to the right. Your ride would be to the right a little bit. Your toms, depending on where they're located on the drum set, you're going to have some left, some center, some right, and whatnot. So I like to set up my drums kind of like an actual live drum set would sound. So I have this pan to the left, just -7, which is super subtle. So yeah, that's that. Then we got the shaker. All I did was cut all this low out and then send it to reverb. The open hi-hat. That's the EQ for the open hi-hat. And just reverb as well. This one, your hi-hat on a drum kit, for most people, if you're a right-handed drummer, which most people are, I've got that panned to the left as well. It's at -13. So that's going to be that. I know it's not super exciting. Like I said, for me, it comes more down to mixing everything to make it sound like one cohesive unit rather than sorry, let me get this to the right spot. I'd rather have my my mix done really well so that it sounds like one cohesive unit rather than throwing everything onto a bus and then compressing it and doing all that. Because like I said, samples are good. Shouldn't need much of that. And all compression is doing is it's bringing some stuff down and it's boosting some other stuff that's below the threshold, and all that's doing is destroying audio quality. So if you can get away from it by just having a good mix, do it that way. I promise you'll have better results. So let me show you what the drums sound like on their own here without any of the other stuff. I'll put these crashes in there too. Sorry. Okay. So anyway, drums sound cohesive. Drums sound like one solid unit. At least to me, they do. Hopefully this helps. If there's anything else that you need explanation on as far as your mixing of drums goes, hit me up in the comments, and I will do my best to answer any questions the best that I can. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. You find what works best for you and stick with it. I have done bussing with my drums, and I don't like it personally. I've heard mixes from other people that do bussing, and it sounds great. It just doesn't work for me in the way that I do my workflow. That doesn't mean that there's a right or wrong way to do it. Do what works best for you. Hopefully this helps. If you guys, like I said, if you guys like my videos, if you've gotten anything out of these, please, please, please support me. When this EP comes out, I would appreciate as much support as possible. Yeah. Hopefully you guys like the videos. Hopefully you guys like my tracks, and I will talk to you guys later.